Stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Village of New Paltz humbly acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Munsee, Atsopis, and Lenape people. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 forced the people to relocate to inhospitable territory far from the bountiful valley and mountains we inhabit today. The village further acknowledges that much of the physical structure of our village and town was built by enslaved Africans who labored as the property of their owners until 1827 on this very land. They acknowledge and honor the contributions, resilience, and accomplishments of the BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous, and people of color community who have overcome historic injustice to inform our past and inspire our future. The Village of New Paltz encourages everyone to learn more about the contributions and sacrifices made by the Indigenous people and enslaved Africans by visiting the sites that we have listed on all of our agendas and minutes and on our websites. If you have anything that you believe we should add to this list, please let us know.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? And move that we
We don't consent the consent agenda.
vote on the consent agenda.
So what's that?
Okay, adding to the consent agenda is item number 1, authorizing the treasurer to purchase a new parking enforcement equipment costing a net total of $32,860 paid in 3 installments. So we just need to make it super clear for the community that the parking enforcement is to allow different not just coins, not just credit cards, not just Apple Pay, but all of them can be used with the new and parking enforcement equipment that we're purchasing. And then there's another item on the consent agenda to be added. This is an approval of the payments for the bulk court. And then the 4th item is approve the treasurer to advertise to hire a part-time temporary parking enforcement officer at a rate of $23 an hour. I suggest we adopt the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor? That's all we have right now, right? No. Move to, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
No, we should open the public hearing, right?
Well,
So, but,
we also didn't do announcements, so
okay, anyone have announcements?
I do. Couple of things. One is I know that everybody's really concerned about the free food fridge. Currently, what we used to call food not bombs is being renewed. So that's free meals that are being given away while the next steps for the fridge are being figured out. So that is happening. People are still being fed by our neighbors, and there will be a way for us to continue with the fridge. If anybody wants to help work on that, please reach out to us. In addition to that, as always, family of New Paltz can really use your help and money. In particular, they always need personal care items, so toothbrushes, toothpaste, sanitary napkins, things like that. Everyday items, brand new, and in perfect condition for our neighbors who are in need. As well as any financial assistance you can share with them. There are also classes right now being given for seniors, which is 55 and over. I don't have it in front of me. I'm gonna leave it off the wall. Basic computer skills, Family of New Paltz is offering them every Tuesday of 10 a.m. to 11:30, 51 North Chestnut Street. And you can bring your computer or tablet or whatever, or you can use one that they have. And, leave it at that for tonight.
Um. Are we done with announcements from the board?
Yes.
Okay. Let's, move to, I move that we open the, public hearing on the proposed cable franchise agreement.
No
Between-
public comment for, just general public comment?
Jenny, anyone here for general public comment? Come on up.
Hi, I don't know where to stand.
Feel free to just grab a seat, just state your name.
My name's Estelle Garrett. I obviously live in the Village of New Paltz. I'm here to advocate for having public access, channel. I specifically tend to, do comedy in the community center every week with the improv group. It's very enriching, but when I really think about specifically having a public access channel, the reason that I think it is not just enriching, which I think should be pretty obvious, but actually a good decision to be made business-wise for Spectrum is the entertainment that people my age, at least in my experience, actually engage with. So I'm 25 and I have never had cable in my life. I have never had any TV besides Netflix streaming stuff in my entire life. And that was initially a choice because I had hippie parents, but when I actually grew up, I did not have any desire to spend any money on watching anything, let alone more than $10, $15, $20 a month on something very specific. I don't find that likely to change. The type of entertainment that I actually engage with and that the people in my life that are my age tend to engage with is made by personalities that they personally relate to and tend to at least feel like they are being made in a scrappy DIY at-home way. So I watch a lot of YouTube, I listen to a lot of podcasts, I watch YouTube essays and I watch vlogs and people just chatting about their lives and doing funny skits. And I've done that since I was 10 or 11. That's what my little brother who's 15 does. Imagining a world where getting a TV subscription actually gave me access to a sort of scrappy underdog feeling group of people making creative things I could relate to, creative things that I could potentially even participate in, would 100% make me reconsider when it was time to get, renewed internet access or whatever. When I hear the deals now that Spectrum's like, oh, well, if it'll only be this much extra, I think, why would I pay any amount extra to watch a bunch of ads and then shows that I could just find on YouTube clips of, or, on Netflix or anything like that. So I think that it's basically twofold. It will attract younger, cable viewers, and it will also enrich the community. It'll give people something above, just local venues, which while being extremely fun and exciting to engage in, you don't always have the money or the time to head out and get a couple beers and hang out with your friends, and when you can tune into a TV show. So I think that there are lots of local talented people that show up every week to the community center. There are lots of local talented people that show up to the multiple running open mics that are here all of the time, to the Pulse of New Paltz. I'm very sorry if I got that wrong. That's at the Lemon Squeeze. There's a thriving community of people that you see all the time if you are a creative person in New Paltz and you are seeking community. But for the people that do want to stay home during the cold months, the people without a bunch of expendable income and time, TV is where people would actually go to look at that. And honestly, if you don't get public access TV, this art will be made, but it'll be made on YouTube, and Spectrum's not gonna make any money, and the town's not gonna make any money. And so it kind of feels worthwhile to put it somewhere where it could do something good for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I've moved to open the public hearing. That is the, cable franchise agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone else want to make a public comment in support of the, franchise agreement?
Yeah, sure, I'll kick off just to put some more context. Hey, everybody. All right, so my name is Joseph Anthony Davis, and it's great, thank you so much for having us here and for getting us this far. I've been a part of this board for the New Paltz Public Access for about 3 years. I graduated from New Paltz and digital media production, and in my time there, created videos about the community, about the stories of people who lived here, like Ludwig Montesa. And just this year, we made films about, the Hudson Valley Open Farmers Market. And we were even here in the Village Hall on the meeting to end racism last week. We captured that. as well as even working directly with you guys here in the village to make a video to help explain pros to consolidation and your opinions on that, and going through serving the community, because we live in a digital world where media is everything. And my goal and dream for this was to get as much as we could out of this new franchise agreement, which will be the first one since 1995 for the village, if we're able to pass it tonight. And 2019, since the town had a new franchise agreement. It also brings $15,000 to 3 non-for-profits that Spectrum will choose. And we think it's a great thing. The community is excited about it. And I also just want to shout out my late uncle, who was the vice president of the public access in North Adams, Massachusetts. He passed away last year and served for many years, and took me when I was a little boy to their incredible studio out in Massachusetts to actually see what it looks like to turn on your TV and see a calendar of what's going on in the town. And I think for our seniors, for people who are not technically savvy, to go on Facebook events and see what's going on, that's my most important thing. I want to create a community space where we can see everything that's happening. And I also want to create content from children entertainment, community entertainment, and also informative historical work. So I ask you, the board, in the words of Mr. Fred Rogers, the amazing Mr. Rogers Public PBS broadcast, won't you be my neighbor and help us tonight get this finally through the finish line? Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Hi, my name is Christopher Pollock. I'm a citizen of Hurley, but my first introduction through this was through New Paltz and the work of Joe Davis and the public access. That's how I first found out about Huguenot Street in town, was through my introduction with Joe and the introduction going to the New Paltz public access website. That was like a postcard for me understanding New Paltz and understanding the history there, because it led me to videos about this community. Since then, I've been involved with Joe at the community center, providing improv workshops for the community, and we've also branched out to helping out the population at Woodland Pond. My background in media, I've worked for Apple for a decade, teaching people how to use these very devices that you're offering workshops for on Tuesdays for the population. It used to be you had to go to public access to get access to make the very equipment to put things on. Now, everyone in our population is walking around with their own media lab. If it wasn't for the intrepid people years ago who made a video about Huguenot Street and the history of it, and that's part of your public access, I wouldn't be here today. And you have so many more people coming into your population, and you have a community telling the story about your very community. You don't have a newspaper doing that. You don't have a corporation like a newspaper doing that. You don't have a TV station doing that, but you do have public access as it stands. And that, along with the website, is an opportunity to bring your community together and to continue the story that I'm learning about the people here at New Paltz. And in turn, I meet other people in your population that want to organize and do things for the community. Like, again, the other person mentioned this event that we also organize at the Lemon Squeeze that we're doing to help restart the American Legion here. And all the performances that we're doing are being filmed to be put on public access. And those films will also allow these performers to use on other social media. So from this conduit, we're able to help the community, these artists, potentially find livings and share that they do these things, and that the people here in New Paltz, this is what we do here. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak in support of updating our franchise agreement? Martin,
Tim,
how are you?
good.
Martin makes movies.
Yeah. Watching you. Hi, I've been video photographer and amateur, and make videos of the area. Some of my projects have been building of the Traps Bridge. I documented the playground being built. A lot of spoiling events like races and triathlons. I actually started the Minnewaska race. I was a runner and I volunteered. And to do a water stop on Castle Point. I brought a cheap digital camera 20 years ago. Took a lot of pictures and then I had to stop taking pictures. I have this problem with my finger, it goes like this over. All right, so yeah, I just like to expose everyone to what I do. I'm not looking to make a living out of it or anything. I just like people who enjoy my work. I put a lot of effort into it and I would appreciate it if more people could see it. And I think that when people see this stuff, and have more access to it, and there'll be more people attracted to it. Which is, basically, that's it.
Sounds great. Anyone else want to show support? Go on up. You don't have to show support. You can also, if you're, for whatever reason.
My name is Caleb Borstock. I'm new to the area. My undergraduate I received from Hofstra and television broadcast, and my master's is in education for secondary English. And I taught in Great Neck as well as the South Bronx and the NYC DLE. So do you have a time limit tonight?
3 minutes.
Okay, so, yes, I find public broadcasts to be very beneficial for the town of any size, but you know, you could certainly provide educational opportunities for students in the area of all levels, from high school to college as well. I would love to be on an asset as well to the public broadcast community and donate my time and be able to provide, you know, programming that we all love from back in the day, like Mr. Rogers. I was looking at a quote of Mr. Rogers today, you know, he was trying to get funding for the public broadcast station many years ago. So just, you know, education and I'm very fond of this community. I actually played my last collegiate rugby game like years and years ago here. So I just, you know, I envision a lot of media can be produced, you know, at the public level for educational purposes, and like the other people mentioned as well, for Huguenot Street, you know, I think that's a fantastic historical scene that the Hudson Valley could use also more tourism, you know, I think in the area. So I think all of those points I could elaborate on as well, but thank you for the 3 minutes of your time. And yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking on, come on up.
Hi, Mayor Tim. Hi, trustees. I'm Ben. I am also with these guys and I am speaking in support of accepting the deal from Spectrum. I've been involved with the local music scene for the last year and a half or so. And I recently started organizing some new Slice and New Pulse activities at the Lions Grace. And we had the public access guys over to record, and we're looking forward to being able to broadcast some of the great local art and artists that we have. And also to look to moving the community public access into the realm of modern media. So, yeah, those are my 2 cents. And thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ben.
If there's no one else, I'm gonna suggest that we go ahead and close this public meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'd like to move that we approve adoption of the updated franchise agreement, and thanks Joe for and everyone there involved who's, you know, led the charge on this. And it was actually kind of a lot of fun actually hearing how impassioned everyone involved with public access is. It's nice to see people excited about something that feels good.
I'd like to add something.
Go ahead.
Well, as you all know, our major media are being under attack from the Trump administration. And we see it in networks, we're seeing the attack on corporation public broadcasting, national public radio. So local effort, what you're doing is, I think, essential, has become more essential as a result of the last year or so. Thank you.
Here, here.
Good point, Bill. All in favor of the adoption of the franchise agreement? Aye. Thanks. 4-0. And I don't believe that I amended the consent agenda before, but did I move it?
Yeah,
So
we didn't amend the business.
I did not move the consent agenda, right? So I'm gonna,
No, you did. We did.
okay, the consent agenda is all set. Okay, so
We didn't.
now, we have,
Do the changes on the business agenda.
yes, I'm
And then I
still doing
didn't-
that, and I'm still doing the public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we still have a public hearing open for the village manager law. So this would just, provide the option for the village to hire a manager when the law is adopted, basically like as we've described in the last couple of meetings, just a valuable option for the government, in terms of just making sure that we have staff to get administrative tasks done here at the village. So anyone interested in making a public comment regarding the village manager draft law?
My name is Michael Thielmar, I live in New Paltz. Can I just make one aside about that? I just want to say it's amazing to see a whole new generation of people super excited about public access.
Totally.
It's just great. Okay, so I spoke to you all a couple of weeks ago about the village manager draft law, and I just have four short things to say. First, in the time since I spoke to you last, I've been listening to all of your comments and explanations, and I have to say, at this point, I agree that this there's value in having this local law, so thanks for bringing it forward. But I do have a couple of specific comments about the draft. The first one's about the residency requirement. I had previously said that it felt better to have somebody very local. You made some good comments about trying to cast a wide net. And so actually I would like to sort of expand that and ask why not cast it as wide as possible? Why actually require that somebody live in Ulster County while they're holding the position? There's certainly local precedent for people who are administrative managers. For example, there's a nearby city in which their manager doesn't live in the same county in which the city resides. And so perhaps, there might be the best candidate living somewhere in Orange County and they can't move. So that's one consideration. The other second thing is that under the powers and duties, there's a long list of powers and duties that are ascribed to this manager. And what I worry about is that it consolidates too much authority in a single non-elected person. And so I would ask the board to consider two revisions. One is that the wording in 35.6 currently says that it shall include all of those powers and duties. I would suggest that you change that to may include. And perhaps if necessary, also just indicate some language that says that these powers and duties will be decided by the Board of Trustees. That'll give you.
I personally like both of those.
Yeah,
That's great. And then the third thing is more of a process thing, and I preface this with, I am not a lawyer. However, the way it's currently written, it refers to the fact at the top that this could be subject to a permissive referendum based on the way that it is written. And I think the key portion of that is section 35.9, which I'll get back to. Section 23, I think it refers to in municipal home rule law, indicating that it's could be a permissive referendum because it specifically says, if you're creating or abolishing the manager position. However, that's predicated on the idea that you're not abolishing, transferring, or curtailing any power of an elected official. And that specifically is how it's written in 35(9), and I don't need to read you the language, but it uses those words. However, my concern is that, for example, the mayor at the Board of Trustees meeting on the 8th of October, so I guess that was the last meeting you had. You said, quote, basically, what is, I'm not gonna say every word, but it is otherwise a quote. You said, what is clear though is you would not have a situation in our village, for instance, where you would have a village mayor getting paid a full-time salary and also a full-time village manager. That would be completely unnecessary. Makes perfect sense. However, in plain language, not legal language, that feels to me like you're transferring powers and duties to this non-elected position. And so I would just ask that, I'm sure I have huge respect for your village attorney, and but I would just ask you double check and make certain.
Yeah, I think all of those are good suggestions. We'll run by Will and make sure that the language makes sense and your questions make sense to me as far as like,
Yeah.
let's triple check and make sure that it lines up.
Great, and good luck.
Thank you, Michael.
Why don't we just keep the public hearing open and then we'll share Michael's feedback with Will, ask him to, run another review of the draft. And then this way, if we need to show the draft to the public can have another bite at the apple of commenting. Okay.
Yeah, you should, if you're gonna make any changes.
100%, yep. Okay, so this law remains open. I'm sorry, this public hearing for the draft law remains open. And,
I'll add a comment to the draft.
okay,
I have a comment.
okay. So then let's move on to the business agenda. I wanted to, add a couple of things. So I want to add business agenda item number 2. This is a resolution. It's a joint resolution that, we can consider tonight, and then the town said that they would be interested in looking at it at their meeting tomorrow night. And then we also have a that Stana led the charge on, and I'll let Stana describe that. And that's item number 3. And then we also have an opportunity to chat with Mike Baden again about the work he's been doing on updating the zoning code. So I move that we accept the business agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So let's jump into item number 1. So at our last meeting, we talked about the proposal that is before the Ulster County IDA, where the developer is pursuing a payment in lieu of taxes, tax abatement for 15 years. That would also give them the benefit of not paying sales tax on construction materials, as well as not having to pay mortgage recording tax. And then the other benefit when you're arranging something with the IDA of the possibility of issuing tax-free municipal bonds. So our community is definitely, and I've been on the record for years and years and years. Someone shared with me a comment that I made in 2020, a recorded video comment for another project about the problem of using pilots for for-profit housing development. So there is a way to offset it, and it could be done via the community developers agreement. What we've shared with the attorney who has reached out to us about whether we would be interested in working on one, it's like we could have a discussion with you, but we want to make sure that discussion is taking place publicly, so there's no confusion or anything is lost in translation. Because I think the other rub to all of this too is like, sure, the project is cited in the village, but, you know, there are other taxing authorities, including the school district and the town and the county. And this all speaks to how, you know, we're a largely under-resourced local government. The idea of negotiating one-off agreements with more sophisticated for-profit developers, you know, that feels like, in a situation that, you know, is above my pay grade. And that's why I'm a big proponent of actually not having unique situations where local taxing authorities, including Village of New Paltz, have to negotiate anything. It's like, you know, we have a paradigm, and that paradigm includes there's an assessed value and a tax rate, and then your tax bill is just the multiple of those two numbers. That's all determined by the assessor, and that's, you know, separate from anything that we're involved in. And I understand, you know, the function of IDAs where, you know, you can make an argument that sometimes a tailwind is useful because it helps with economic development arguments, but I continue to struggle with any for-profit housing pursuing a tax abatement. And the argument is that, well, it will benefit the community broadly, or, you know, we have actually was listening to a commentator not just talk about a regional or national housing crisis, but they suggested that our housing crisis is international, and I've never heard that argument before. But this idea that, you know, we're gonna support for-profit development of housing, and that's gonna trickle down and benefit the rest of our community, which I think is a giant stretch. And you know, I've been on the record making arguments along those lines for years and years and years, well over a decade. So you know, the representation from the developer has asked us to make suggestions about what could be included in a community developers agreement. And, you know, for me, it's like when you're running a budget for a municipality, it's just revenues and expenses, and do the revenues pay for the expenses? So, you know, this idea that we're gonna play this like smoke and mirrors game and say like, well, we need a contribution towards a fire truck and, you know, something else for, you know, some other very specific, you know, governmental expense that we have staring at us in our face. And it's like, I feel like that's a smoke and mirrors game. Like I feel like that's a way for us to, you know, end up in a situation that we're uncomfortable with. And, you know, if the argument for a pilot is it helps with a developer's predictability in terms of cash flow expenses, like, you know, we know that you can't predict what your school tax bill might be next year or in 3 years from now. But if you could like eyeball it and say, well, you know, the school taxes are gonna be, you know, roughly this amount, and you know, that helps with, you know, the developer securing financing. I feel like, sure, that argument could be made, and that might be a reason to provide an arrangement that is different than the conventional assessed value times a tax rate is your responsibility. But this offset needs to be damn close, if not exactly what we believe it would be, because I don't see how this trickle down argument that just building housing generally is supportive for our community. It's like, you know, it's like Sana brought up, you know, challenges that we're facing with the free food fridge. Like my day-to-day involves dealing with people who are in crisis. There are people in this community who have needs. There's affordability challenges. You know, we want to see, you know, anything that, you know, our government can provide as far as programming to benefit our community members directly. You know, I'm not comfortable with the idea that there's a for-profit housing development that like, well, we need housing and it's gonna help with your cost of housing. And the reason that we need to help you is because, you know, it's really expensive to construct housing. I understand that it's expensive to construct housing, but by making things less expensive for the developer, I don't see where the direct benefit is for our community. So, you know, if the argument again is that, well, this helps us with predictability as far as cash flows and expenses and, you know, what we should expect in terms of, you know, running this property from a you know, tax bill expense perspective, maybe, but, you know, this idea that, well, tell us, you know, these different projects or expenses that you need. It's like, you know what we need? I need money, like revenue to pay for staff's health insurance. I need money, like revenue to pay for staff's salaries. Like, this is not, you know, because if we don't have that money, then we have to increase tax rates. Like, you know, we don't need smoke and mirrors. We don't need funny, fancy projects. We need to have a balanced budget where we have expenses for providing services. I need staff that can plow roads. We need, you know, teams that can, you know, make sure that, you know, the building department is run effectively and efficiently. That's what we need. We don't need, you know, I need mortgage recording tax. Like, please don't take, don't give our mortgage reporting tax basket a haircut, because that's gonna help a developer pay for a 2-bedroom unit that is estimated to cost $500,000. Like, I understand it's expensive, but by making it cheaper for the developer and there's no direct impact to people who live in this community, I just think that's inflationary. I just think that's exacerbating the realities of how unaffordable things have become.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when I go to the grocery store now, everything that used to fit in the bag now costs twice as much. And it just feels like that's what's going on everywhere. I don't know that us providing a haircut for a developer, you know, it feels like it's a giant stretch to make the argument that, you know, there's some sort of benefit broadly for our community that's going to, you know, it's like, and I think what's fascinating about New Paltz at this point is like, we have developers interested in constructing for-profit housing, right? Zero Place did not pursue a pilot. New Paltz Apartments did not pursue a pilot. The 2 projects being constructed by Baxter right now did not pursue a pilot. They're all like comparably large apartment complexes. They're all subject to our affordable housing law. So, you know, and I know that the county executive and the director of county planning have said, you know, maybe it would make sense to use the IDA for housing when, again, there's like, you know, for instance, if you're doing 20 or more units in New Paltz, 15% of them have to be affordable. So if the developer is proposing something that includes more affordable units, and therefore there is a direct benefit to people living in this community, then sure, I think that could potentially support a pilot. But again, without direct benefit, and the only benefit is basically for the you know, the profit margin of the developers involved, I just feel like this is a giant stretch. So, you know, that's why we have shared this as an opportunity to have these conversations. But, you know, I'm trying to be like hyper transparent about, you know, my thoughts on this generally. Does anyone wanna chime in?
Well, there's a lot, you said a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just a little concerned about the lack of engagement from our school district and other
Yeah.
tenants and entities. I'm a little dismayed that, the developers are asking us to play a game of whack-a-mole in terms of our needs. That seems to be what's happening. There doesn't seem, at least in my email inbox, there doesn't seem to be any interaction in terms of, hey, let's meet, let's talk, and all that. It's been several weeks since this whole process began. I don't know where this leaves us, other than I know that we still have a very strong stance about being opposed to this pilot. And what are the next steps here? I mean, it seems like it's sort of, the idea is going to vote on this on the 20th.
I'm under that impression too. I mean, I plan to be at that meeting and,
Yeah.
I imagine a few of us
Yeah,
will be there.
and, I was particularly dismayed as a person who reached out to the other taxing agencies. I got like an acknowledgement from one of them and that's it. And there was no. Unfortunately, I really was hoping for a coordinated effort here for us to work together, to cooperate, and saw this as an opportunity for all of us, to stand up together, united for our constituents and to get something done to do the right thing here. And so having them not take that opportunity with us and cooperate with us was a big bummer. Also the same, I have seen the emails where Bill said several times, like, have we heard anything? Have we heard anything? And the fact that we haven't heard anything, and then we hear from their attorney asking us to come up with ideas like this, no, like, just pay your taxes, that's my idea. Pay your taxes and let's do this the right way.
Okay, any other comments or, that's kind of just our general report out on this
Yeah.
topic and.
It's rather galling that we've got all this development happening in our community. And these developers seem to think they need to have some sort of tax break. I mean, where are they coming from?
Well, and that's exactly, when, the three of us were all at that meeting, earlier in October and we were, we explained our concerns and, but for this assistance, I can't build this project. I mean, to me, it's like, the but for argument is a very strong argument. In general, I don't understand how we can survive as a community if we're providing housing or providing tax abatements for for-profit housing. It just feels like completely unsustainable.
Absolutely.
And at that meeting, there was the feeling that I got that they were gonna reply to your
Same.
questions. Yeah.
Same.
But yeah, they did. The IDA member did talk about, but for being an important concept that they needed to, understand more fully. So hopefully they're, considering that concept in their deliberations and we'll see what they're saying on the 29th.
And, how come the other developers did not need that but for? How come they're all able to do it? And they were all doing similar projects? In some cases larger even, in one case. So we'll see what happens. We'll go to the meetings. Keep
Yeah,
talking.
and it's been suggested that we call the state comptroller's office and get them to shut things down. That's 100% not how this works.
A lot of things.
So, yeah. This idea that, there are pilots that have been granted in New Paltz and something is going on in New Paltz. I think what is unique is that developers want to construct things here. It's not like, the tail is wagging the dog. It's like the developers want to be here and they're aggressively looking for whatever will, support their projects. And I understand why they're doing it. We just have a responsibility and I appreciate that we take our responsibility seriously by, challenging the IDA and, we're in this very unique situation where generally the pilot concept should have been discussed during the seeker process. And it was not, and I believe it was not because the developers who were involved, their investors, were originally not considering a pilot, and then they got new investors involved and they have decided to pursue a pilot, but they came on board after the seeker process was completed. So it feels like a very unusual situation where it's like, I served on the town planning board, plus 10 years ago. And well, I know you did it, but I'm speaking about a very specific situation where we denied a project that was for-profit housing pursuing a deviated pilot. And in our finding statement, we denied the project because of the impacts from the pilot. And that was part of seeker. That's where you would be able to include those concerns. And the developer sued our planning board, and the judge sided with us and agreed that there were negative impacts. But in this situation, there's no opportunity for the planning board to, to even consider, what the environmental impacts, which include fiscal impacts, could be on our community when for-profit housing is, enjoying a pilot.
I'd like to add that I learned from service on the planning board and as well as service here as a village trustee. I think that the general public is under somewhat of a misunderstanding that, we want certain projects or we have tried to get projects like this started. And, we do change zoning and work on our infrastructure in order to be able to have the things that we feel that we need, including affordable housing, et cetera. But as far as specific projects go, developers come up with projects and come to the village or the town planning boards, and it's dealt with that way. It's not the other way around. We haven't, we didn't come up with these grand ideas. Yes, previous administration did change zoning, and we have changed zoning because we believe certain things.
Yeah, but it's super important to emphasize that there's no zoning being changed
Right.
to accommodate any problem. That would be.
Absolutely not, right, but the zoning for the NBR.
It's just mixed use.
It's just mixed use, and the previous administration had, and that was under Jason West, had, wanted there to be mixed use there up to 4 stories. And when Zero Place decided to build something of that height, people got really upset about that. And so the many concerned citizens got together and did a whole study group, and things were changed so that it could only be 3 stories. Like, this has happened with community input, with community making changes, with, not just from one board or one developer or a board and a developer, or this has been happening for quite some time with a lot of community input. It didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, the 3-story, so all new buildings in the NBR as well as the B2 are capped at 3 stories.
Correct.
Tim, would you just allow me for the board and?
You want to come sit so maybe the
Yeah.
back will pick you up better?
Yeah, for the board and for anybody from the public who might be listening, for those who don't know me, Mike Page is Director of Planning and Zoning. The IDA was not named as an involved agency at the time that the planning board reviewed this because, as you said earlier, there was no indication that a pilot was being sought. The planning board has the obligation to identify any other involved agencies, which are any agencies which must issue a permit or make a decision So they concluded the process of the negative declaration and or arrived at a negative declaration under seeker. I've done some review, I've consulted with our attorney, I've consulted with the village attorney. A number of people have suggested that the planning board should A, revoke the approval, and B, reopen seeker. Neither one is legally permissible. They went through the process with the information that we had at the time. Now, what that does mean though, is that the IDA must now conduct their own seeker. And, to what level they conduct that is certainly up to that board. But I just want to clarify, I think most of you probably already know this, but for anybody who might be listening, the planning board simply does not have that option.
At this point, right?
At this point. It's not legal. We certainly would be challenged in an Article 78, and quite frankly, we would probably lose. So that's the situation, so.
The one last thing that I wanted to comment on too, which I think is important to all of us, because we talk about it regularly, is like, what's interesting about a community like ours, right? Is like, you know, we have people's heads exploding while we're doing all this infrastructure work, you know, like North and South Chestnut has been disrupted, you know, most of this year. It's a complicated, expensive project. You know, we're updating the, you know, various, sections of the sewer conveyance system. You know, these are all projects that have nothing to do at all with any of the new development. These are all like once in 100-year type projects that take place. But the reason that I'm bringing it up is that all of our water and sewer capacity, for all intents and purposes, is finite. And for me, I really struggle with the idea of extending water and sewer to projects that are getting a haircut on their property tax bill that we're opposed to, when it probably makes sense to reserve that capacity for properties or projects that, you know, we're not opposed to, because they're not pursuing pilots as they relate to for-profit housing. So I just wanted to include that piece as like a concern. And I again, I don't know that, you know, we've spoken with our attorney, like we don't have any legal standing at this point, because the project was already reviewed and
So-
approved by a seeker.
Yeah, so there's a door that I think an open door there for developers and to be examined. Because certainly, planning board has no business asking how someone's going to finance their project. However, when it involves looking for a tax break, this is a totally different animal in my opinion. And I'm not sure how that would be addressed, in state law.
Well, actually, just to build from that, we actually do ask that question. When we're beginning seeker,
Yeah.
since I've taken over this position, and probably prior to me, the attorney reviewed, you review the part one, which the applicant completes, and they identify any other agencies that need permits from. And that very question,
Yeah.
because of my previous experience, I now bring up to them point blank and say, you know, are you applying for any federal or state funding? Excuse me, not federal, state or local funding, because those agencies have to be included in the seeker process. And that project started right about when I first came in. And I can't say with 100% certainty, but I could go back in the minutes and see if I did ask, and I believe I probably did. And at the time, as the mayor said, the developer that originated this project didn't indicate that they were going to pursue this. It's only come about with new investors.
Right, and you know, you and I had this conversation, even after the seeker was approved, you felt like you were hearing less from their team and you were wondering, is this project going to happen? And that's exactly the way it works when you're looking around for new investors. So it all adds up in terms of the timeline and how the pilot conversation never occurred until they came to our office and just told you and I that they're getting a pilot.
Yeah.
And that is where we said, good luck, that's going to be a heavy lift. You're probably gonna have to, work really hard to convince our community to do that. And then, they present to the county IDA that meant that I was giving them a green light. And then I have social media people misrepresenting conversations. So, that's part of how this works.
Since you brought up the discussions with the county IDA, just to clarify too, and I confirmed today with the deputy clerk, the IDAs, when they hold a local public hearing, they send us a potential date. And I have the email thread, if the board would like to see it, where they asked for a specific date, the room was not available. And we gave them a number of dates, 6, 7, 8 dates, where we said the room is available after 4 p.m. There has been statements that the Friday 4:30 p.m. was picked by the village, and that is completely false.
Completely false, complete misrepresentation. But actually, even at the time, the chair of the IDA sat here and said that the village only gave them 4:30 in the afternoon, which is 100% false. And I spoke with the executive director of the IDA subsequently, and I told her I didn't appreciate that complete misrepresentation. And we have the email chain where they 100% asked for a 4:30 slot. They
They didn't
asked
ask,
for it.
they said, we will do it on this day at 4:30.
Yeah, they didn't ask. They said, this is when we're doing it. We gave them like 7 different dates. We said anytime after 4, they said, we want to do it 4:30 on a Friday. They also don't even need to come to the village. They could host a public hearing anywhere in this jurisdiction. It doesn't have to be in the village hall. If they need another time, they can go to the school, they can go to the community center, they can go to the university, they can go to P&G's. They can have a meeting anywhere they want. And it's this is what I don't appreciate about these folks who thinks it's okay to misrepresent us. And, all of this stuff is documented. We have the receipts. We have the email thread.
Mhm. All of it is Google. Should we move on?
Yep, let's move on. So we have a resolution to consider. So this is in response to, we got a note today from Kitty Brown, the town of New Paltz deputy supervisor. She asked whether our village board would author a resolution saying that we are opposed to a dissolution vote. And I said, sure, we will 100% do that. And say that we are opposed to a dissolution vote, and if our community wants to consider consolidation, the benefit to that is that the vote would be townwide. And so we have drafted a resolution that says just that we are opposed to a dissolution vote, and we are in support, if there is a vote, that it only be a townwide vote. And I asked the deputy supervisor whether she would like to have the town board also vote on the same resolution as a joint resolution. And she said that she would. So we have our resolution here that says what I just described. So I move that we sign on and resolve to be officially opposed to a dissolution vote, which would only allow village voters to participate. And if we decide as the town board and the village board to consider consolidation, that the vote only be a town-wide consolidation.
Second,
Any further discussion?
we want everybody to have their say.
And we've said that over and over and over and over again, so now we can write a resolution and say it again.
Follow along.
Should we read it?
But,
It's called a follow along.
all in favor?
Aye.
And then, Stana, you're gonna introduce the next resolution?
Sure, so. I worked on this, with some other people who are working with this family. And I'm gonna read what we have, it may be tweaked, I'm gonna bring it to Ali's sister, for final, approval and editing. Resolution of the New Paltz Village Board urgently advocating for the release of our neighbor Ali Sahad, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Akirzada. Whereas the Village of New Paltz, New York Board of Trustees is committed to the health, safety, and well-being of our community members, and we are particularly grateful for our immigrant neighbors. And whereas on October 14th, our neighbor Ali Sahad Farizada appeared at a credible threat hearing, a screening process to determine if there is sufficient reason to hold an asylum hearing. The decision was that a credible threat does exist and an asylum hearing was scheduled for November 13th. Nevertheless, Sahad was shackled and sent to the ICE Delaney Hall Detention Center in New Jersey. And whereas over 3 years ago, he and his family fled for their lives from the Taliban and arrived in the United States and were taken in by our local community who assisted them in finding housing and furnishings, raised money for their support, helped them to obtain driver's licenses and vehicles and find legal representation for their asylum cases. And whereas, as the eldest son, Sahad took primary responsibility for the well-being of his family that includes his parents, 3 other siblings, and his aunt. He is well educated, currently a full-time student at Bard College, with his fall semester being interrupted, and a very competent young man, hardworking, law-abiding, faithful, and very appreciative of the help he and his family have received from our community. Ali poses no threat to the community, and he has no criminal history or prior immigration history before seeking asylum. His continued detention causes great hardship to his family and community who depend on his presence, care, and support, and therefore be it resolved that the Village of New Paltz hereby formally, respectfully, and urgently requests that he be released from detention and reunited with his family while his immigration case proceeds. His character, family, and community support and willingness to comply with all legal requirements demonstrate that he poses no flight risk or danger to the community, and be it further resolved, we urge our county, state, and federal elected officials to take on this fight to free our cherished neighbor Sahad immediately. Be it further resolved that the village clerk is directed to send a copy of the resolution, and it's going from everybody from our senators to our congressman, governor, state senator, state assembly person, et cetera, up and down the whole chain from the local to the state level. And I'm going to send this to the town and ask them to do the same thing tomorrow night up there.
I love that addition, Stana, that you're sharing it with the town. It's like, thank you for putting this together. Thank you for working on it. Because I think it's a great example of something that like clearly, is important. We wanna, speak to this kind of inhumane approach to immigration. And I'm really pleased to hear that you also want to share that with the town, because I feel like what happens so often is like various municipalities are like, well, look what I did, and look what I did, and look what I did. And it's like, enough,
Let's all do it together.
do it together. Thank you.
Yes.
I think a disturbing irony in this is he was going for a credible threat hearing. And in fact, the threat itself was here in the United States.
Agreed.
So,
And thank you for your help with that.
so your motion,
I move that we, resolve, that we pass this resolution.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I move that, we adopt the bills and claims resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I move that we chat with Mike Raven about our proposed changes to zoning.
Thanks for continuing this process. Been a little while because I was unable to make the last meeting, but let me share screen here. Yes. So, we left off last time with the development district standards. As you remember, we had, from our initial discussion, we will be eliminating the R1 district, which is the larger lot size residentials. To sort of paraphrase, and if anybody wants to correct or add to it, was that the board felt that it was somewhat of a I don't want to say unneeded, but it was just not as needed as the R2 and the R3, which are more village sized. The R1 is more very rural community sized properties. So then moving on to the R2, we removed the senior minimum lot size, and we have addressed that now in that there's a density bonus award ability for a developer to be granted a density bonus if they are characterizing housing as strictly for seniors. So we don't have to have two sets of standards. We have one standard and a density bonus. Since the last time we met, though, we did, Alex and I were looking at something, and we realized that in the R2 residential district, there are some non-residential uses we allow, things like daycare centers and things like that. And we had no lot size for them. So, in theory, it's allowed because it's allowed use, but you can do it on any size lot as long as you can meet setbacks and things like that. So what I'm proposing is that it be 15,000 square feet. That's like double the residential size, because if you look at the R3, the non-residential use is also about double the residential size. So,
But I think the reason that it's in there and it doesn't include a size is because, you could have someone doing daycare for like 2 toddlers. in the
Well,
house.
that would be a home occupation.
Yeah,
When I'm talking about daycare, with the new definitions, that's a home-based daycare center, which is a home occupation, which is an accessory use.
okay.
So what this will be is a building and facility that
Primary use
is
daycare. Okay,
strictly
I see what you're
daycare.
saying. Okay.
It's not residential first.
That's a good catch. Thank you.
Yeah, and it was probably something that just simply was never tested. So it never came up until we had a question about a potential business in an R2 zoning district, and I started looking at it and I went, we have a little problem here. So that number is a placeholder. If we feel like we should adjust it, we can, but, and then very little change has happened in the R2. In the R3, we did the same with the senior citizen. We'll award a density bonus of double the size that's allowed. So essentially, if you're doing senior only, you get a double density bonus. everything else has pretty much stayed the same in the R3. In the historic district, and this is just the nomenclature, wherever we talk about short-term rentals, the more correct definition is short-term transient rentals. It just helps solidify what it indeed is, so.
You know, I wonder though, I feel like when we adopted our short-term rental law several years ago, that we discussed, because the prohibition of short-term rentals in the historic came like 15 years ago.
Okay,
So I was under the impression that our updated short-term rental law would supersede this.
I'll have to look and
Because-
check the
Because,
language.
you know, I think our intention, right, is like, if you go on vacation, you can rent out your house, or if you have an extra room, you can host short-term rental, like,
Okay.
I mean, maybe-
I'll definitely investigate the short-term law, which is now incorporated into the zoning code. So if by chance we've set up a discrepancy, then we can simply just remove.
and maybe we want to continue to prohibit 100% in the historic districts.
Yeah.
But I seem to remember our conversation was, we were creating an updated short-term rental law that would apply village-wide.
It does to some degree, but I'll double check and see if we need to adjust that. Again, no changes in the setbacks or anything. Commercial zoning, and what I've done with the districts is now, rather than being one section where all the districts are just one after the other, as I split them, there's ones that are primarily residential, which is the R1, the R2, the R3, historic. Then ones that are primarily commercial, which is the B2. The changes there in number 2 are just, there actually is no Schedule F that I've been able to identify, or if it is, it's long disappeared. So, they'll be in the code itself, the site development standards. And I gotta see if that Schedule G exists too, because I'll have to check with Nancy. The Ulster County Community Design Manual, which it was a document in 2017, is a sort of a working Bible for different types of development based on characteristics. So we want to, Bill you were a member when that was worked on, yeah. So the Design Review Board has the review power, not the Historic Preservation Commission. They only have review power in the actual historic district, or if something is listed on the National Register. So we've separated, you adopted a new local law that separated, even though the boards exist coterminous of each other. So that's why that change is made in letter A. Nothing else really changed in the design standards. Certainly, if you guys think something should change, let me know. I found that it was mostly adequate and appropriate. The offices, there's 2 different definitions, professional and general. Quite frankly, I'm combine them into one definition. An office doesn't, separating it professional and general, it's the same type of use. Whether it's a law office or a
Nonprofit.
real estate office or whatever. we did not have it, just an aside, we didn't have a definition for artisanal use, even though it was used in the code here, so we now do. The B2 will still remain the same with the uses where non-residential use on the second floor will need a special use permit, and the B2 is emphasizing commercial or office use on the main floor and residential on the second floor and higher. Still, all the standards are all the same. I've taken out the references to lighting in this section of code because we are now have a section of code that deals strictly with lighting across the board. So it's a little redundant to have it in two places. Parking remains the same. So moving on, as you're seeing, few changes here. Put in a reference to the Village of New Paltz development standards for the gateway that were adopted in 1999. When I started here, I didn't even know that document exists, so one of the planning board members asked me about it, and I was able to locate it, but now we have a reference, so anybody reading the code knows here's where your set of standards are, rather than bringing them all into this code. The mixed use, I don't really consider the B2 to be a mixed use because it's primarily business, although, you know, we want to encourage if you are building up that it's residential, whereas in the neighborhood business residential, it's actually called a mixed use district. And so we're encouraging mixed use in there. So we have that district. Again, the code has remained almost word for word the same. A few little nomenclature changes. Instead of calling them first floor apartments, they're first floor residential units. It could be an apartment, it could be a town, you know, apartments was too defining. This makes it just what it is. It's a residential unit. Facing away from, the intent was facing opposite Route 32 north. What this is that say you can do residential on the first floor, but it must be not facing toward Route 32. It can be on the back side of the building, but that they must be accessible units. The square footage in less than 40% of the total first floor square foot area. What we didn't want, and this came about in conversations that I had with Alex, we were starting to see applications come in that would have very little business and a large number of apartment or residential units. And it sort of takes away the concept of what this district is trying to do, which is they work in harmony with each other. So the 40% is my made up number. If you guys think it should be more or less, let me know. But I'm basically saying it can't be more than, you know, I started with half and went a little bit less. Because you want the first floor, now,
Primarily,
what this is saying is the first floor has to be 60% commercial.
I think that's a good target.
And that was again, my number.
What do you guys think?
I like it.
The perpendicular came about because there were, during planning board review, there were things of, could there be residential that had access from the side of the building? And the planning board, what I got from them during the review is they really didn't like that idea. They wanted the commercial to wrap around and keep all the residential to the rear side, opening to the rear. So that's why I've changed that language the way I did in number 3. So, and then number 4 just is a carryover of the sides of the opposite shall be limited to residential, so they can be any type of use. They can be residential or they can be, so we've now covered one's facing Route 32, one's facing north and south, and one's facing away from 32.
It might, in terms of consistency of usage of professional general offices, you eliminated professional general offices in a previous section. Are you going to do that with these?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good catch. Thank you. That's why, we're looking at this. What page numbers are some? Let me just get that real quick. I've got it straight. Sorry. Page 112. I'll fix that tomorrow. Thank you very much. Bill. Now, this was the side yard issue. The current code says they 0 to 15 feet maximum. The issue is where the NBR district exists primarily backs up to the rail trail, which does not allow for any access from a roadway to the rear. So anytime they get more than a certain number of units or a certain size, and Bill, you may know the numbers, I don't off the top of my head, it requires 2 fire accesses. And the only way to do that is clearly a north and a south fire access. So the 0 to 15 is not feasible because the fire access has to be minimum of 25 feet. So the exception that I put in there right now, several projects had to go to the zoning board of appeals to get a variance in order to create this fire access. It's not something we can say, no, you can't do it. If we say, no, you can't do it, the project goes away. So my feeling is the board, meaning this board, can give the planning board certain abilities to waive standards in certain situations without the need for a variance. So what I've added is to a maximum of 35 feet in the case of street access fire roadways. But that it can never, the side yard, anytime it goes greater than 35, it would need a variance. Now, if it goes greater than 35, it's because they chose to do it, not because they had to for the fire access. So that's why I've sort of done. Now, the other option is they could do a shared access, like the one project has done, but you can't mandate that because one developer doesn't have any legal requirement to give somebody access over their property. You hope they can negotiate and make it work, and in the case of the 2 projects that are side by side, they did. But you know, you can't make that you don't want to create a situation that can't be attainable if the neighbor says, no, we're not doing that. But this way, we will still maintain the spirit of the buildings being close together and still allowing for potentially 2 accesses side by side. And you know, to build off that, DOT won't even allow that. DOT may come back and say, no, you have to merge your accesses because they don't want 2 access points. Again, those numbers are kind of my made up numbers, but the 35 is based kind of on the fire code of you could fit a 25-foot access road in there, which is what the width needs to be for fire, and still have a little bit of room before the building, 10 feet of setback. And this one I just took out this, you used to have a document that was outdoor lighting standards. I brought more into it than into the code, but I did review your outdoor lighting standards and pulled over a number of things from that. So I just wanted to make it so we didn't have quite so many documents. The rest of the NBR, absolutely zero changes to. The professional business and professional limited business. We're calling it senior housing now instead of life care or continuing care retirement community. There's 10,000 square feet per dwelling, but the density bonus may be applicable. The only reason I've left that in this PV district is this is the district where Woodland Pond is. If you potentially you could be getting another, not saying anybody's proposing it, but this way it would keep all that in that sort of vicinity. Residential, this is, you don't have a separate residential lot size. I'm proposing 15,000. It is a little bit bigger than what we do in the R2, but it's also further away from the village proper. It's not particularly in walking distance.
I mean, isn't it basically just Woodland Pond?
Well, there are some vacant pieces of property in the PV district that could be developed for a single family house. And right now, we don't have any standard. So again, the 15,000 is my made up number, based on the fact that you don't want to encourage dense residential, non-community, single family houses. So I came up with that number to say, because everybody pretty much has a right to put a home on a piece of property if it meets the zoning standards. And you didn't have a standard for that zone. If we don't like that number, we can change that. And then all other uses are 40,000, that's current. Because in that district is also where warehouses are, smaller warehouses are allowed and larger impact because most of that district is accessible off of North Putt. So that's like a truck route because it's right there off the thruway. Oops, I got a page I'll have to delete there. Supplemental standards, we had, it used to be called so I've separated to when an accessory structure is attached to a principal building or detached, because it makes a difference. And we've also gotten rid of the word building and changed it to structure because that's certainly more appropriate. The no accessory structures permitted by this chapter shall be placed in a required side or front yard setback is provided for in item 4. This is going to keep, any accessory structures when you get to item 4, you'll see it's based on square footage. We've said anything over 200 feet, which is a 10 by 20, or, it's a sizable accessory structure. That has to be setbacks, but if it's less than, and it's not attached to a principal structure, it's got to be located not less than 10 feet from a side yard. Nobody wants their neighbor to build a shed like right on their property line. So a 10-foot setback. Again, these 3 items of code were borrowed from my town of Rochester days. And these were ones that we wrote for Rochester that, it also, accessory structure in any rear yard can't exceed 25% of the rear yard setback, so depending on what your rear yard setback is. And then we have a picture that sort of explains that, like, you'll see the little small shed there. That's able to be there 10 feet away, but the 200, yeah.
Makes sense.
We have this current code that, no accessory building shall be located closer to the street than the street wall of the principal building. We have a real world example of that right now, in that a gentleman, he had a 10 by 10 shed. Smaller than, no, I'm sorry, 12 by 12, which does not need a building permit.
Right.
However, he wants to, his house is, oh, he's on Plains Road, his house is well over 100 feet away from the road. He wants to put this shed up near his driveway, and he had to come to the ZBA for a variance for something that he didn't even need a building permit. And so that's one example, but this is I understand the intent of it, but I think it's a little too heavy-handed, in my opinion. So I'm suggesting it be removed. We say though, no accessory building can be located to the side and rear lot lines less than the distance equivalent to the height of the accessory building. That's simply, if your building falls over, it's not gonna fall on your neighbor's property. And that green is from another code, and I don't remember the reference of where I found that, but it's in another code section somewhere. Swimming pools and hot tubs are not discussed at all in this code. Those are also accessory structures. We're just saying they simply have to conform with New York State Uniform Fire Prevention Building Code. That's the laws about having to put fences around swimming pools and hot tubs, or having to keep the hot tubs covered. It's code whether we put it in here or not, but it's a reference to just remind people. A lot of people seem to think hot tubs don't need a permit. Solar, yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Does that go for smaller things like plunge pool?
It's under the building code, I think it's everything greater than, I think it's 24 inches deep, I believe, which is 2 feet. But I could be wrong on that. Maybe it's 30 inches, but there's a depth which triggers the building code being, so, you know, the little kiddie pool that you put 8 inches of water in, no, you don't need a fence around that. But anything that somebody could potentially. True enough, but, solar energy is something this code doesn't mention. It probably predates, well, it doesn't predate solar, but it probably predates the use of solar. There's a whole separate section about solar energy, but I've referenced it because it is an accessory structure. Your fences and walls I've left alone, except I did add this, and I haven't seen it happen yet here in this community, but I have seen it in other communities where you have a fence height rule and somebody says, okay, and then they build a nice 2-foot mound of dirt and put the fence on top of it and go, well, it's a 4-foot fence, but really they have a 6-foot fence. So we say it's measured from the natural contour of the ground to the top of the fence. If you're building a retaining wall or a combination over 8 feet tall, it's gonna have to go to the planning board for site plan review. I think once you get to a fence or wall that's that size, it needs a little further review. And it also needs a building permit. And then we allow the planning board the ability to modify the height restrictions in the case of a commercial or industrial use. where they can go a little bit taller if they want to, or in the case of a residential property, which is contiguous to a commercial. If you're residential and you're directly next door to a commercial property, you might want a 6-foot fence, even though the code says you can only have a 4.
Right.
Or an 8 or whatever, so. And that the planning board has to make a determination in granting that it will create beneficial screening and not impact neighboring properties. Animal husbandry, a whole new section, although we've brought in an awful lot of your animal section about bees and chickens. We didn't bring over anything about common household pets, dogs, cats, those stayed in the animal section. The sort of non-traditional household pets, although I know people who have chickens who come into their home,
Eggs.
yep, exactly. So we're saying you don't need a permit, these are exempted, and right there, customary household pets. If your parcel is in an Ulster County agricultural district, we only have 2 properties in the entire village that are. You can keep animals, that's ag and markets rules. If you're keeping them in conjunction with a kennel or a veterinary office, it's not animal husbandry. This 4-H project, it's more a rural exception, but I've seen it in a number of codes and we included it in Rochester. It's a carve out to allow, but the person has to the satisfaction of the code officer that they can keep it in proper care and the code officer can restrict the number of animals. So this way, you know, if somebody's son or daughter has, you know, rabbits or something and that aren't a normal household pet, but they're keeping them for a 4-H project, you're working with the family to make it work. They don't have to go through a whole permit process. Exotic and native wild animals are not permitted anywhere within the village, with the exception of wildlife rehabilitators who are licensed by the DEC. You don't want somebody suddenly having a lion or a giraffe or something in the village. Stranger things have happened in places. This is where we brought in all the green again, which is certain animals and fowl. So I simply brought it in word for word from the animal code about the chickens and about the bees. There's no changes to that code at all. It's just brought into the zoning code. Residential cluster development, this entire section has stayed the same with the just some clarifications. Obviously, the R1 is gone, so we've removed that. But there's no changes at all to that section except some cleanup. And you guys tell me tonight when you want to stop, you know, if you want to set a time frame or whatever. So
Let's go a few minutes.
okay.
Yeah, not too much more.
No, I know, it's, this stuff can get a little heavy at times. Multifamily dwellings, I've taken out of this section. And there was a new whole section about multifamily dwellings. I have added in a section on conversion of residential or non-residential structures. If you're converting either a non-residential to residential or the other way around, a residential to a non-residential. A more intensive residential use, it has to go through a special use permit standard. And that's basically it. Awnings and canopies, I've left alone. Trash receptacles have stayed alone, except we've said for non-residential properties, dumpsters and drop-off boxes. Drop-off boxes are those, sometimes you see those clothing boxes that people can dump stuff in that just become, they're not always emptied as diligently as they should be, and they become, overflowing. We're gonna limit them to rear yards or screen side yards, so we don't want dumpsters front and center. And remember, in your code, you don't allow dumpsters on residential properties anyway, unless it has 10 or more residents. ADUs remain the same. Just again, some cleanup and some corrections to a few minor things. Home occupations, this is where they will be classified as an accessory use to a residential use of property, obviously, home occupation. We will have we'll split them into 3 classes, class 1, class 2, class 3 with varying standards. Class 2 and class 1 is the least amount of notice. Class 2, a little bit more, class 3, a little bit more. So class 2 or 3, we're gonna allow 1 non-illuminated sign not to exceed 12 square feet. When you get to those higher levels, you know, maybe they do need to advertise a little bit, but it's no home occupation shall be added to, expanded, or enlarged, or otherwise increased without shall not be a basis for a later application to establish a principal commercial use. So somebody can't start a home occupation, have it get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then claim it as a by right use. If you want to make it into a commercial use, if it's allowed in that zoning district, then you have to come in for the proper review. You can't just assume, you know, it happens often that somebody starts a small, whatever, a yoga studio or whatever. I mean, I'm just thinking of example, hair cutting, and next thing you know, first it's 1 chair, next thing you know, it's 12 chairs, and now you have a full-blown commercial use. And any home occupations involving the use of contractors or other heavy equipment requires storage of materials or equipment, and that they have to provide, and the planning board may also, under site plan review, permit out storage if it's fully screened. So this way you don't have somebody parking dump trucks in their driveway for a business kind of thing. I won't go through all the differences, but class 1 is basically a no impact home occupation. You know, the right column sets the requirements of the standards, so the code enforcement officer can read through, or the applicant can read through and figure out which one applies to them. So as I said, 1 is the least intrusive, 2 is a little bit more, not intrusive, but the least presence. Number 2 is kind of a middle ground. Number 3, and I'll let you look through those and sort of figure out if, you know, if you think anything needs to change, and I'll let the planning board check that out as well. Signs may be a good place to stop, because it's gonna be, signs is pretty lengthy.
Yeah.
So why don't we stop here? We got another, well, we started at 19 and we got to 30, so we're moving. So, the November 5th meeting, I will not be able to be here because I have county planning board. I know in the month of November, you guys go to the 1st and the 2nd Wednesday. So I won't be here on the 5th, but I think you're not here either as well. That
Yeah,
night.
I'm not here on the 5th.
So, so I will see you next on November 12th. and we'll pick up with signs and go from there. And, you know, in the meantime, if you guys, if anybody wants to look ahead, if you run into any questions, or if you see something, hey, I had another thought about something we've already talked about. And the planning board is now gonna start, they wanna split it into like 3 sections. And they're gonna do kind of their home review and come back to me with questions, and so, it's a continuing evolving document. I just made some more changes to the parking section just yesterday that sort of reared their head as to make more sense, so. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. We're gonna do any planning board liaison update?
Just a quick one, HPC Design Review Board met on Monday night. The bulk of the conversation surrounded, historic Huguenot Street's proposed visitor center. They held their own sort of public hearing, if you will. Is that flash?
Sorry.
I have a quick question about that. Are we doing like the updated version that's been submitted or still the original one? Because I know that historically not needed, changing.
They made some changes. Historic, HPC was aware of that. But they want to meet with representatives from historic Huguenot Street to talk about their proposal, how it impacts, their work. Planning board met last night, seems like a month ago. There was a driveway expansion that was approved. The project on Prospect and Henry W. Is still continuing to be reviewed, correct? Yeah, or
We closed the public hearing. And the board authorized the attorney to draft a resolution, but it's still, under review.
right in the
But
CERTA,
public hearings.
right, in the CERTA property, that proposal that would to resolution is going to be prepared.
Yeah, and the Church Street property for the infill.
Right.
The 42, 44, they're gonna demolish the front house and create a better access to, and I forget which is 42 and which is 44. One is in the front of the other one. But they're gonna create a fire access driveway. And that one got approval.
And there was some proposal to make changes to the Wells Fargo building.
There was an application for a yoga studio that would be tied to the gym. Would take place in the cellar, which is the downstairs. Cellar being the key word, not basement, because more than half of the walls are below grade. Because it was part of it would be part of the approved gym, it would be an accessory use. So it isn't allowed use. Board reviewed it. There was discussion about number of parking spaces required to be added for that. Currently, the project has 5 more spaces. The approved project has 5 more spaces than the minimum number required. They needed 6 more for the yoga studio. So the discussion was, should the yoga studio be smaller to get it to 5 parking spaces? Or could the planning board waive? And the planning board asked me to speak with our new consultants, Colliers, and get their feedback on parking because our code doesn't have a specific parking standard for a gym. It just.
Yeah, but we also have guidelines.
Right.
Requirements too.
Right.
And you're
So,
talking about one parking spot.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get some feedback of whether the consultant feels like eliminating that one spot is a problem or not, and then we'll give some guidance back in the party. So, the applicants, they'll be back at the next meeting, and our next meeting is not until the 18th of November because the 4th is canceled due to election day, so. And the ZBA meeting, while I'm speaking, is the 11th, which is Veterans Day, and they have chosen to move it to Thursday, the 6th, because they do have 3 applications that are in the works with them, so. They didn't want to miss the entire month.
Okay,
Okay, any ZBA?
That was the extent. The three applications involve 6, 8, and 10 Cooper Street, the duplexes that were built. So,
They're still being built.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's an ownership issue, so it's
Yeah.
not really about.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's applying for a subdivision, but in order to get a subdivision, he would need an area variance for side yard to divide each lot into 2 lots. So that's the current, it's set for public hearing at August 6th.
On November 6th?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, and then, I think there were some questions about, on the consent agenda, the parking enforcement equipment. This is just handhelds, and it's not whether or not it's app versus coin, and if anything, we're trying to buy additional kiosks to put in different spots within the village that would give people the option to use credit card or coin. It's exactly the same kiosk that we cited in the lot behind the Starbucks. It's a nice small unit, and the idea is that it's versatile. You could even put it on streets, and then it could serve like a bunch of on-street parking spots. So the reason that we bought that one first is we wanted to make sure it worked, because historically we've had issues where we buy kiosks that cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and then they're problematic. So we wanted to tread carefully, because we like the idea of giving people the option to buy with buy parking with coin or the app, you know, because the advantage of coin is that they're not paying any additional fee that would go to the app company. All right, I don't have any.
Or credit card as well, right?
Right, credit card, you're right, you could do app, credit card or coin, but with credit card, you're. Yeah, I guess you're not paying any fee.
You're not paying
Credit
any,
card.
no.
Yeah, and it's just not a swipe, but it's the chip.
oh,
It's a chip, because you can go and look at the unit at the Starbucks. I took a picture of it, if anyone can see it. But it's this, you know, I would love to buy as many of those as possible. I think the next one that we're gonna buy, we're gonna put in front of Ashford Park.
yeah. it's fine.
So, okay. Motion to adjourn.
Second.